Hey, what's up, everybody? Josiah here with EasyCaters.com, and today I'm going to walk you through how to set up and adjust the settings on your VWAP Z-score indicator and strategy. So what I'm going to do is now when you purchase the indicator and the strategy set and everything, you'll get some Thinkorswim import links. And I have a separate video that goes through how to install everything from those links. And that the link to that tutorial and everything is included with the download. And so I make that really easy. I have bookmarks and everything in the YouTube video to show you exactly how to install the different types of scripts that come with it. And I even include a full chart layout where you can just import the whole chart and it'll already have everything laid out for you, at least for the indicators and the strategy file. And then the column and the scan you can set up later. And so I have a separate video to walk you through all of that. This video is just going to focus on how to adjust the settings, because I know when you get a new script, there's a lot of settings there, and you're kind of mystified as to what each one means or how to accomplish what you're wanting to accomplish. So I'm going to go over setting that up. And to do that, I'm just going to go ahead and pull up a pre-made layout similar to what I send you with the download. And so I'm going to go down here to z-vwap. It's just my short name for the layout. And as soon as this loads up, this will look pretty much like what you'll receive in the download. And so let's see here. I think my computer's going a little slow because of the video. Yeah, give me a little error there, or warning. But this is what you'll essentially get with that layout. And then you'll have the chart indicator, or the scan and the column that will be able to be loaded on a sidebar or in Stock Hacker or wherever you want to use that. But this is what your chart will look like. And so this includes a lower indicator here, which is in a subgraph below the main price graph. It also includes an upper bands indicator, which shows the VWAP in the middle, which is the mean, and then it has standard deviation levels above that and below that. And then there is also the strategy file, which is essentially a duplicate of this upper indicator that shows these levels. It's essentially the same exact thing, but it has some special code that allows it to plot theoretical entries and exits, so that Thinkorswim can use that and then plot this potential, like this theoretical floating profit and loss if you had taken those entries. So it allows you to back test different settings. Say you want to try it on specific stocks that you like to trade. Well, you can pull it up on those stocks and tweak the settings of the strategy just for those particular individual stocks, so that you can kind of optimize it and so forth for that type of trading, whatever type of trading it is you're doing. The trading that I've done on this has been on the E-mini, and so that's where I'm going to focus with this. And so when you get this, it will essentially have all the settings set up for this, for the E-mini. And so this shows you, if we go in here into settings, the settings are essentially going to be the same for the upper indicator and the lower indicator and the strategy. You'll have the time frame that you want to use. Now, the default is going to be daily. That's the typical VWAP. That's usually what VWAP is calculated on. But you can calculate the VWAP for the week or the month. And if you're trading a longer term chart, then maybe you want to use those VWAPs as well. So I've started including the multiple time frame VWAP in here because I've had several requests for that. You can choose the volume type. This basically is just so you can switch between volume or tick count if you prefer weighting the average based on volume, share volume, the number of shares actually traded, or if you prefer weighting it based on the number of trades that actually happen. So that's what tick count means. So you can switch between those two different volume sources there if you want, and that changes the VWAP calculation slightly. And then the price type, this is actually the per bar price. So each bar has, of course, an open, a close, a high and a low. And it also, in Thinkorswim, it also has its own individual VWAP level, which is kind of like a midpoint or an average, but it's a specific value just for that bar that tells you what is the volume weighted average price for that bar. And so you can, if you don't want to use VWAP, some charts actually don't have a per bar VWAP. So in that case, you can switch to a different average type like the OHLC divided by 4 or the high-low divided by 2. So that gives you an average of the high and the low of the bar. So you can switch to those. I know Midas line traders also use like the high and the low to calculate the VWAP from. So you can change to that or even the close or the open. Lots of different things you can do there. I try to make the VWAP calculation completely up to you, essentially, where you can customize it in so many different ways for whatever type of trading you're interested in doing. I try to leave all the settings of all my indicators open like that so that nothing is set in stone in the code or hard coded in where you can't change it. So those are the first couple of settings. Then this is the only setting that will change between the daily reset version and the normal version, which I have open here. The daily reset version doesn't have this period setting. This is essentially smoothing the standard deviations over the past X number of bars. So you can see here the deviation levels are pretty consistently spaced apart in this chart, whereas in a typical VWAP, standard deviation levels are not evenly spaced because they reset at the beginning of the day, and so they're really close together. The standard deviation is really small first thing in the morning, and then it expands as volatility develops throughout the day. Well, this setting allows us to smooth that out and essentially keep those standard deviation levels at their typical width. And so you can create the average width over the course of 100 bars, 50 bars, whatever you want to set this to. And so the default, I think, is either going to be 50 or 100. I put it at a default level. I think the screenshot on the side shows 100 period, and so that's what I have it set to here. 50 works pretty well as well. The more data generally that you include in the average, the better it's going to be. But that's just a good round number to keep it at. And then you've got your standard deviation levels, and you can tweak these if you have specific beliefs about, or if your testing has told you that, certain deviation levels are important, then you can adjust those here. So for long entries, the important one is the second standard deviation level. So lower deviation 2 and upper deviation 2 for the short entries. So you can see here as the price comes down and crosses that second standard deviation level right here, that's where the entry is triggered. And this would be the third standard deviation level right here. And so those correspond on the lower indicator to this is the lower deviation 1, lower deviation 2, and lower deviation 3. So that's how that works. And so the entry is triggered when you cross the second standard deviation level. So if you want to adjust that standard deviation level, you would go to the second standard deviation level here and change that factor or that multiplier. So that's how you would adjust how wide the deviation levels have to be and how you change how strict the entry has to be. If you want it to only enter after reaching the 2.5 standard deviation level, then you would adjust that here. You can just change this to negative 2.5, and that would and hit apply, and that would space the deviation level for the entry out farther. I'm going to leave that at 2.0, and then so that's the same thing for the long entries, negative 2, and the short entries, which is positive 2, above the VWAP. And so you can adjust those for tweak them for both your long entries and your short entries separately. Then you can choose your target. And I just have these set to either you can target the first standard deviation level or you can target the VWAP. So essentially what this does is if you switch to upper and lower targets, it makes it a little harder for it to reach. So you can see here that now, instead of exiting as soon as it reaches VWAP, so we triggered in down here, we retraced back up to VWAP, but it didn't exit there. Instead, it waited until we reached that first standard deviation level back above VWAP. So it's essentially saying once we get oversold, we expect it to get slightly overbought at least. And so then down here, the same thing, we get oversold, we come back up, and this is actually a time stop. So it was holding out, waiting for the first standard deviation level above, but it was late in the day. And so instead of exiting and holding out and holding overnight, it exited just before the close, essentially. So it just got you out of your position right before the close. And here on this entry, we get oversold, crosses VWAP, we don't exit, we wait and hold out for the first standard deviation above. So when you set this to upper and lower targets, that's what it does. It basically just requires it to reach the first standard deviation level, whatever you have that set to here in your multiplier, on the opposite side of where the entry happened. So if this was a short entry, it would have to reach this first standard deviation level on the lower side. And for long entries, it has to reach the standard deviation, first standard deviation on the upper side. So that's how that works. Or you can just leave it at VWAP and it will exit when it retraces back up to VWAP. Then we have use a stop. You can turn a stop on or off here, and it's a percentage-based stop. So 0.01 means 1% here. And there's little tooltips here that tell you this. 1% equals 0.01. It's just the decimalized form of 1%. And you can turn long and short, either one individually if you want to focus on only short entries or only long entries, or if you want to use both, you can change that here. If you want to change the price that actually triggers the entry, where the close of the bar has to be below the second standard deviation level versus it just has to tag it with the low, essentially. Even if it closes back above, that's fine. So you can change that particular price that has to be below that standard deviation level right here. And that is what will get you into the trade in the back tester. So, and then use start and stop times. You can see here we can turn on where you're only trading, even if you have extended hours turned on, it will, if you turn this on, it can turn off the ability to test during the overnight hours or take entries during the overnight hours. And then you can turn on exit before the stop time, which is what this was, where it was holding out for the upper standard deviation level up here, but instead of holding out overnight, it exited right before the close. And so it exited before the stop time. And you can set the start trading time and the stop trading time right here. 1600 is the 24-hour time for 4 o'clock. So these are entered in Eastern time zone, and they're entered without any separator, and they're entered in 24-hour format. Minimum standard deviation width. This is a setting where if these deviations were not spaced enough, where like at the beginning of the day when they first, when their standard deviation levels are typically reset, especially in the daily reset version. But if at any point during the course of the chart, the deviation levels get less than this amount, then it won't take an entry. So this is, I just have it set at 25 cents, which is a pretty small number, but you can set that as needed there, and it won't take entries unless the deviations are at least that wide. Use MA for trade direction. So this is a filter that I found out, at least on the E-mini, adds a little bit of reliability percentage points to the strategy. I'll take a sip of my tea before it gets cold here. So this essentially says if we're above the moving average, the daily moving average here, then we can only take longs. And if we're below the daily moving average, we only take shorts. And so this adds some accuracy to this strategy. And you can see here, you can set up this moving average however you want. You can use any type of moving average that Thinkorswim includes here. You can set the time frame of the moving average. Mine is set to daily. You can set the length of the moving average, which is 10 is the default that I have it set to. And so as long as the daily chart is above the 10 MA, then it will only take long entries. And if the daily chart is below the 10 MA, then it will only take short entries. And then you can show and hide the clouds, which is just these shaded areas above and below. And so that just adds a little bit of a coloration or presentation. Makes it look a little cleaner and everything. If you want to turn those off, you can do that. If you don't want any of these lines on your chart, you can turn all of the lines off selectively here with each of these plots. There's a plot tab for each line that's plotted on the chart, and you can uncheck the show plot box here. If you just want the VWAP to show up, this is the VWAP, so you can just leave that one on and turn off all the others. The MA, that refers to this moving average that you have to be above or below. So those are all the plots. You can customize how they look, the line thicknesses and styles. You can turn them on or off, etc. Orders. So these are the orders that for the actual backtester that allow you to kind of customize their behavior a little bit and change the color of the entry plot and so forth. I probably shouldn't need to adjust that too much, but if you know what you're doing, you can adjust those. And then we have alerts for whenever there's an entry, and this tells you what each alert means here. VWAP LE signal, that means long entry signal. These are just typical abbreviations that are used in backtesting. Long LX means long exit. Short entry, SE. Short exit, SX. And crossing over VWAP, crossing below VWAP. So there's alerts for each of those signals, and you can change the sound that they make and what message they play or show, or you can turn them on or off here with this enabled checkbox. And then finally, you've got your colors that you can change the plot colors and the cloud colors as well. The plot colors are actually going to be in here. The cloud colors are going to be in here. So that's how, and the settings essentially are going to be the same. There's going to be a few less settings for the actual indicator. And you can see here in the indicator, you don't have the orders sub-tab down here because that's a special thing just for strategies. You can see the orders and the alerts. And then I've included the alerts as far as the indicator. I've only included the alerts on the lower indicator because you don't want duplicate alerts happening all the time. So you can customize those all here. You've got your same plots here. You can change what color it highlights when it gets oversold and overbought. You can adjust the colors of all the lines in the plots. The colors of the clouds, the shaded areas, and so forth. So all the settings essentially are going to be the same. And then there's a cap spikes at setting here, and this just keeps everything, the scaling proper and everything. So if you can see here, it gets oversold below the lower graph area of 3, which is the third standard deviation level. So if it gets too far below that, which is like 1.25 times the standard deviation, then it will chop it off essentially and just say, okay, we know this is way oversold or we know it's way overbought. So it just keeps the scaling kind of compressed so that things don't get too out of whack or anything on a really volatile day. But anyway, so that covers most of the settings, I think. As far as the scan, you would pull up the scanner over here in this small menu, and there are instructions for all this in the installation tutorial, so I won't cover all that here. I just wanted mainly to go through all the settings since I know some people are a little mystified with all the different settings included in these. And just be aware that there are these question mark tooltips that you can click whenever you want an explanation of what the setting does. just click that little question mark and it will give you a quick rundown of what that is. And remember, the plots, they can all be customized down here in the sub panel or individually turned off with this show plot checkbox. So hopefully that is beneficial to all you VWAP traders out there. And I'm going to get this out there so that you guys will have a little bit better idea how to control your settings and tweak things and dial in your settings for whatever types of symbols that you want to trade with this. So hopefully that helps, and I will talk to you next time.